Welcome to Talks with Tracy, with certified hypnotherapist, life coach, and licensed mental health professional, Tracy Claremont. Tracy will share her healing journey and explore the many meaningful alternative healing methods in our world today that will support you in doing your own deepest emotional healing. So please welcome the host of Talks with Tracy, Tracy Claremont. Let the suffering end and the healing begin.
Hello and welcome to Talks with Tracy. I'm your host, Tracy Claremont, coming to you live on the Bold Brave Television Network. Thank you all so much for listening. I appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to do that. And thank you, Bold Brave Television Network, for having me as always. I always appreciate the network. So I am so very thankful to have a very special guest back on the show today to share her experience with narcissistic abuse. We spoke about this last week and we're still talking about this topic. There's just so much to talk about when it comes to narcissistic abuse and trauma. Now, of course, I'm talking about the amazing and beautiful Ash Benavides. Now, last week, Ash joined me and she gave an update on her life. And I've done several shows with Ash now, where she has talked about her experience, her lifelong experience with narcissistic abuse. And, you know, she's really just got a wealth of knowledge in this area. And she has spent the last full year recovering from this, healing from this, doing a lot of really hard work. She's made great changes in her life around this. And I have proclaimed her an expert on the subject by way of experiencing, she's done research on this. She's researched the topic herself, educated herself on it. She's really done that deep dive inward into her own emotional experience to gain her awareness and to make changes in her life so she can change these patterns. So she's just done a ton of healing, and that's why I have proclaimed her an expert, and I just love having her help me talk about this all-important subject. So now last week on Talks with Tracy number 39, Ash and I talked about how she really spent the majority of her life in kind of a state of confusion and chaos. And this is the kind of confusion and chaos that results from the experience of one toxic relationship after another. And all of this began in childhood for her with her father. And, she so eloquently described this as a lifetime of being in a state of WTF, right? And, also within all of those years of confusion, chaos, toxicity, she experienced a couple of very serious accidents, which caused her to have some injuries to her brain. Now, she's kind of alluded to this or mentioned it here and there, but we've never really talked about this part of her life, and it's very significant. So today, Ash is here to share that part of her life with us. She's just a great demonstration of how a lifetime of that kind of confusion and chaos and toxicity can lead not only to emotional injury, but also to physical injury. It's really hard to function in a clear, careful, mindful way when your mind is so consumed with all of this, again, confusion and chaos that comes, all of this distraction, emotional distraction, and accidents can happen in the midst of that and very frequently do. So she's going to share what her life is like, what life is like when you take trauma, you already have trauma, and then you add traumatic brain injury to an already traumatized brain. So it's been a very interesting journey for Ash. I'm so thankful that she has shared her journey with me. And, she just shares in the most candid, beautiful ways. She's a great demonstration, like I said, of doing the work, of healing. She's just an inspiration to us all that all of this can be done, and you can still, create great positive change despite all of this adversity. So, she's really persevered and survived so beautifully through all of this. So please welcome back to the show the beautiful and amazing Ash Benavides.
Good morning.
Good
Hello.
morning. Hi, thank you for being here once again. So, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. I did not sleep really good last night, so I'm a little
Oh,
tired.
darn it.
That's all right
Oh,
though.
yeah. Um, well, when you have I will say this later, but when you have brain injuries, often insomnia is a symptom when you have, things that go on and in your brain or damage to your brain. So, I did mention that patterns of narcissism and narcissistic abuse started in your childhood with your father. And I just kind of wanted to ask you to remind listeners, I know we've talked about it in the past, but remind listeners about your experience in your childhood, because we're going to be talking about your brain today. And it's really important for us to understand what was happening in those super important years of brain development, through it when and your experience of childhood trauma, so that we can understand your brain and how it was impacted by childhood abuse as well. So, can you just remind us about what your experience was in your
You know,
childhood with your dad?
when I was a kid, kind of go back to like I always knew that something was wrong, and I didn't like being around my family in general. There was no real reason other that same thing I tell people, your sixth sense. Like if there's an
Mm.
intuition, you got to listen to it. And then on a note, like traumatic brain trauma can also happen in narcissistic relationships and toxic relationships. It
Mhm.
actually shrinks your
Yeah.
hippocampus. And
Right.
if you can, yeah, and there's a lot people can research about how trauma creates brain damage and what it does to the brain.
Yes,
There's
I love that you're saying that. It is, in fact, scientifically proven
yeah,
that people who experience childhood trauma have changes in the regions of their brain that balance emotions and
yeah,
control impulses. So, I mean, balancing emotions, controlling impulses, those are super important things to do. And it is, you're right, it's scientifically proven that brains are impacted, damaged in those areas through the experience of abuse.
yes. Yes, that's
Right.
correct. And in my situation, it started early on with my father, and I was in an enmeshed family. Which, if there's viewers out there, enmeshment's a whole nother rabbit hole of narcissists. It's like a chessboard basically of game players. And
Mm.
so early on, I was exposed to this, um, and we're talking under 6, 5, 4. There's a lot of abuse that happened even
Mm.
before I was born with my brothers. And what happens is over time, like my first time I ran away from home, which I've mentioned before, I didn't really have a reason. I just did it. I ran away 3 times from the ages of 12 onward, and I was awarded the state by the 15. The issue was I didn't really understand why I ran away from home until this last year of understanding, like, it
Mm.
didn't feel right. It didn't feel good there. Something was wrong. All I knew is whatever was going on wasn't okay. So I chose to leave it.
Right.
And then, looking back, it was in an enmeshed family with a narcissistic father. So
Yeah. And
really picked up that flight.
isn't it amazing that you just expressed that you experienced this in your childhood and then went through the majority of your life all the way up until this last year without having an understanding of what it was, or why it was, or why you experienced things how you experienced it, went the majority of your life without understanding that. And I think that's the experience of a lot of people. You don't even know it's not normal, right? And then until like something happens one day and you're like, whoa, wait a minute,
Right,
this isn't normal.
right.
Yeah.
Right, which was
Amazing.
learning about the term narcissist. I didn't know what that was even 3 years ago. And there's so much to a narcissist, mentality that You can go on and just the research and what they do. They all have the same traits, and that's where I thought, oh gosh, this is what I grew up in. So that was the
Yeah.
first stage of life. Yeah.
Right. And your mind likes, one of the rules of the mind is that our minds like what's familiar to us. Whether it's good for us or not, our minds will gravitate towards what is familiar to us. So your mind gravitated towards multiple relationships that were familiar, that had these toxic dynamics just by way of, yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of, even in friendships, a lot of my relationships had that basis of people pleasing and avoiding conflict. And looking back, it was casebook. Every single person, whether they were friends, and not all my partners were that way, but there were so many similarities, and it all stemmed from my childhood. And it was essentially me seeking it out without even being aware of it. And it was the same repeated pattern, same sort of breakup, same sort of, endings, the same type of text messages, phone calls, interactions physically with these people. They all sort of, if you start looking at, I like that quote, I may have mentioned it before. I would say apply it to everybody. If you look at your past relationships, and you'll start to see the trend of your mental illness. So, and in my case, it's like I look at it and I see that, holy cow, you've been a people pleaser and had no boundaries in a lot of abusive relationships, and you were constantly avoiding conflict. There was no like communication and, hey, I don't feel comfortable, because a lot of people, when you bring up boundaries, they don't like it. I mean, this is a given. So, but yeah, that was something that was really detrimentally, like shocking to realize that I spent a majority of my life, now that I'm 40, and now I look back and I'm like, wow, that was a lot. That was a lot of stress I put myself under. So,
Yeah, and we mentioned last week too that, um, one of the symptoms, primary symptoms of childhood trauma is cons- continually trying to get people to treat you in a good way who
yes,
will never treat you in
never.
a good way. That's that people pleasing that you're talking about, and
Yeah,
and blaming yourself or believing that you're to blame, when
right,
gaslighting is happening and all of those kind of things.
right. Yeah, and that's the part that I think that, like I said, you have to kind of go back and look at like where you started in that. Where was it for a person,
Mhm.
to keep repeating, like, we have talked that you didn't grow up in that type of lifestyle, but where
Mhm.
you have to go back and see where you picked those
Mhm.
relationships. And everyone's story
Right.
is different. That's what I find remarkable about these types of abusive situations and what it does to the mind. Yeah.
Right. So, very often, when you have this kind of experience early on, this childhood trauma, and it does impact your brain in the area of emotions and impulses. I love that you share, that you ran away and didn't even really know why. And when we're talking about your brain being impacted in the area of emotions and impulse, you were very impulsive when you were,
Right.
a child as well. And, um, often that can cause a person to be, emotionally reactive in relationship. Um, did do you feel like you were emotionally reactive in relationships before the brain injuries?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was constant. It was like you go into defense mode, or like I brought it up before, retaliation abuse. If people are
Mm.
so abusive to you, whether it's a friend or a partner, you get very defensive and retaliate, like you're trying to force them to see what they're doing wrong. Or addressing an issue, especially in communication, which one of the things I always say is if a person doesn't know how to own their behavior, that you might as well just walk away. Like at this point, well, before it was me trying to convince them, it was this sort of
Mm.
like, we can't move past this unless we both walk through these hoops. But yeah, I would say that I was very reactive, very hyper vigilant, a lot of anxiety that I didn't realize I had. I was
Mhm.
harboring it in my body.
Right. So, I also love that description as well, because if we take that description that you just gave of your state of mind, um, it stands to reason that accidents would happen when you are in this kind of state of mind. I know that with myself, when I was in that state of mind that you just described, when I was going through um, a, a breakup or getting away from a toxic relationship, I was in that state of mind, and lo and behold, accidents happened. I remember being so distracted by everything going on in my brain that I pulled in with my truck into the daycare, Martha's daycare, and completely hit a parked car. Like, the truck that was in front of me was like, nobody was even in it. It was just parked, and I ran right into it. These are like, thankfully I wasn't going very fast or anything, but it was all because my mind was completely someplace else, which can be a pretty scary thing, you know. Thankfully it happened right there in that, you know, relatively safe area. My kids weren't in the car, but that was a result of my state of mind and all of this confusion, chaos, toxicity that really can take over your thinking. Now, you experienced your first um, brain injury at the age of 36. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say that was like the first, documented severe one. I've had some
Okay.
concussions when I was younger, but that one was
Okay.
probably the first. Yeah,
Right. So you had other um, accidents happen before that were less severe. Is that what you're
I would
saying?
say
Or
less severe. Yeah, when I was younger, car accidents. But that one
oh.
at 36 was a pretty big one, or an impactful one. So yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I wanted to mention too before we get into that, because I think it's almost time to go to a commercial break here. But um, I wanted to, when we're talking about being impulsive, you told me a story about when you were 16. Do you remember that story? And you
yeah.
ended up, can you just tell that story briefly, and then we'll go to a break, because it really is a great example of your impulsivity.
Which one? Which one
The
was
one
it?
where you ended up on the Navajo reservation?
Oh gosh, with the breakdown? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah. We were on the side of the road, broke down in a bus, and I was super chill at that point. What are you gonna do? It was in the middle of the desert, yeah, in Arizona, and lo and behold, a truck full of Navajos picked us up, and we stayed on their reservation for like 2 weeks, which was a reservation that had no electricity, no water, and abandoned the bus essentially, like, because it broke down and then someone towed it. But it was very much, we had a direction on that trip, and then it went a completely different direction, essentially. So
Right. It was kind of
just
par for the course, right? For you to
yeah,
kind of do these impulsive random things. 16 years old, you're just a baby out in the world, like hanging
yeah,
out with
yeah,
strangers and things like that. So I just like that story as an example
yeah.
of the level of kind of chaos and things that happened in your life that was normal for you even as a teenager. So we do need to break for a commercial. When we come back, Ash, I'd love for you to really get into this first major head injury, the circumstances, exactly what happened, how it impacted you, and then we'll talk about from there on the relationships that happened after that first head injury, and we'll just kind of build up to your current days. So please, everyone, stay tuned for that. We're going to take a commercial break. You're watching Talks with Tracy on Bold Brave Television Network. We'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery, or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back to Talks with Tracy, coming to you live on Bold Brave Television Network. So Ash, before the break, we were kind of like building up to your experience of this first major brain injury that you had. I believe you said it was at the age of 36. So we were referencing, the trauma that you'd experienced that very likely impacted your brain as a result of childhood trauma, emotional abuse. So, I mean, it's pretty safe to say that there's a good possibility that you already had some damage done in regard to your brain, given all of that abuse that you had suffered through. So we're now up to that first brain injury. Can you describe, please, the circumstances around that injury? What happened?
So I went to a sale, I realize now that this was a very narcissistic friend. Like I said, I kind of gravitated my girlfriends. A lot of them were that way, and not all my partners, but a lot of them were. So I was riding a horse for her in the sale. And this horse, like one of the things that I would say before I had a regret on is I didn't listen to my intuition as much. And in life, I would get mad. So if I didn't listen to my intuition and then something happened, I was like, I knew it. I shouldn't have done that. So in this case, this horse was acting very strange, and I didn't feel comfortable getting on him. And I did it anyway. I wasn't fully in the saddle, and he jumped and spooked, and I slipped off and hit my head on concrete. So then I got a
this was the back of your head?
Yeah, the back left side of my head. So it was kind of a fluke accident. Felt a lot of pressure. Again, people pleasing. I never said no to anyone. Even though I knew that I wanted to say no, I didn't know how to properly, without being so extreme, because I think when you have anxiety or flight mode, you're very amplified. People that have gone through abuse tend to be a little more not gathered and collected with their thoughts. So even in that situation, I wasn't able to say, hey, this horse, I'm not vibing it, and something's off with him, and I'm not getting on him and riding him through the sale ring. It was funny. He was a no sale. He did not sell at the sale for obvious reasons, but that's what happened the first time. And that was when I was very much involved with no longer a friend, that was very much a narcissist. And when you're used to that, and that's all you do, it's kind of like drinking coffee every day, right? If you drink your coffee, it's a certain brand, you put certain stuff in it, you have a type of sugar, and you're used to that. You might not even know, the amounts you're putting in it, and it's toxic, and you just keep doing it because that's all you know, right? So
Right.
it's like,
Yeah.
until you switch it up, until you really make that active change, you don't realize what you're doing. So that was the first head injury, and I was in a relationship.
Right. And you're also describing that was a moment where you knew something was wrong. You didn't feel comfortable However, you weren't able to express that, stand up for yourself, have boundaries, things like that, because that just wasn't familiar to you. So your mind was, again, in a state of confusion, chaos, uncertainty, all of those things. And again, that's when accidents are likely to happen. So now
Right.
this was damage to the back lobe part of
Yeah.
your brain. And this is a super important part of your brain. Well, all parts of our brain are super important, but
Right.
this back lobe part, is responsible for like vision, and you can a damage to that part of our brain. It can cause color blindness. It can cause something called face blindness, where you no longer recognize faces. It's so interesting the different things that different parts of our brain control. Like reading, writing, it can cause hallucinations, all sorts of things. Now, thankfully, um, the damage, the symptoms that you experienced after this were not that severe. It could have been, but they weren't quite that severe. But you did have some symptoms. Can you tell us about how life was a little bit different after this first brain injury?
Yeah, I'd say the two big ones that I noticed at the time was I wasn't able to like have alcohol or go out. Before I was kind of introverty, but I also socialized. And I would say that first one made me very not. It
Mm,
took a while. I would say in the beginning of that head injury, I went back to New Mexico. I didn't listen to the doctors, of course. They told me to get rest, and no, I went back to flight mode. I felt
mm,
unsafe. I felt uncomfortable, so I hauled my horses and my airstream to Taos and needed to be where one of my heart places was, and some friends stay with them. But in the weeks to follow, I was out of it. I would just stare at their
mm,
chickens. I would just stare off. I wasn't. And I think
mm.
the scariest moment for me was when I went in the bathroom one morning and I didn't recognize my own face. I was like,
Oh,
I didn't recognize who I was. And I reached out into the
oh,
internet world and started doing different things to help. Like I really upped some omegas, but the long term aftermath of that, like I didn't realize, I didn't do a lot of research on brain injuries at the time. 'Cause it takes years for your brain to kind of heal or reroute. And in the case of that, I went back to my life. I'm very stubborn, or as like people say, they think I'm very tough, and I noticed that I really loved when I was out on pack trips or camps. I loved being isolated, like in the wild. I loved
mm,
it. I just wanted a dog. Actually, I didn't even need a dog. I didn't even need a horse. I was completely happy out in nature. And I'm not talking like a park, I'm talking way out
mm-hmm,
there, um, by myself. And
mm-hmm,
my activities when I was out there by myself, like preparing a camp, was, setting things up, swimming, reading, cloud watching. So I was pretty out of it. I'd stare at the clouds all the time or watch bugs in there. It was like my brain kind of toned down to this more simple place than it
mm-hmm.
had before. And then, just
Right.
not consuming the alcohol that I've had. Um, and that was the first, those are the things I noticed from the first head injury.
Right. Yeah. And um, I think you've expressed to me too that the act of socializing kind of became a scary thing for you. So before, you like to go out, have drinks with your friends, things like this. Post first head injury, your experience with alcohol was much different because it caused you to have blackouts quickly,
Yes.
and then that was a scary thing, so that makes you want to retreat out of that social way of interacting with your friends and move into this safer alone kind of space. So after that head injury, life went on, and you experienced a couple more romantic narcissistic relationships plus friendships. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was still with the one guy that the first head injury happened
Okay.
with. And he did that whole thing. There's a fellow online called, sorry, there's flies, I'm on a ranch. Uh He's on YouTube, and he has his own. He's growing pretty well. He's a self-aware narcissist, and his stuff's quite funny. And his
Uh-huh.
groups or his site's called Mental Healness, like healing, but LNESS. And he did this video called the Narcissist Workout, and I laughed so hard because one of the things, and he's really comical about he is a narcissist, and he's telling the world what they do. Well, there was a part where it reminded me of Tim, my ex. He'd constantly leave. Now, keep in mind, we never fought. It would just be random times he would pack up and leave me. And I was left very confused, very hysterical, and then he'd come back. And this happened over like 20 times in this relationship before I did end it. I was like, and again, I didn't know what this was until watching these self-aware narcissists explain to the world, this is what we do. And in that video, he like hops over a fence and he's like, just kidding, I'm back. You want to be with me, right? Like that's what I went through. But a girlfriend was the one who's like, hey, I think you're dating a narcissist. But again, I still didn't do the research. I was like, what is a narcissist? And that was after my first head injury. I was so, when you get like injured and then you've got trauma and then you're dating someone that's confusing, you're basically in the state of what the fuck. You don't know, you have no peace. You have no, even you chase peace. You want peace, but it's not peaceful. And so after that first one, ending that with my ex, and I was very upset. I was very emotional. I mean, one of the things I learned about narcissists is they actually don't care when you break up. Like, they will and they won't. Like, this guy, he didn't care. He acted like 3.5 years was nothing. Like, oh, no worries. No skin off my back. Because what he had done is he went to my friends. Again, if you look at the book on narcissists, they'll take your friends, they'll do a smear campaign. So he went and lived with some friends. He already had his new job lined up, his new life, his new identity. So he was good. He didn't care what I was going through. And I was so emotional, confused. Again, even though I was the one that ended it, 3.5 years is my longest relationship with a person. I just struggled with commitment. And then ushered in the young guy. I mean, he was like the knight in shining armor, like Jason Momoa lookalike. Like, and I'm thinking to myself, really? Like, because that's when they come in, right? A narcissist
When
will
you're
come
vulnerable.
in at your weakest moment when you're vulnerable. They can, and if you watch if you Google these self-aware narcissists, they are in help and they admit their stuff. They have to stay in therapy, but they tell people this is what we do and this is why we do it.
Right.
And
Right.
in that moment, of course, the love bombing was incredible. You got this long-haired, handsome, what is he, 24 now? He was 23. Just like,
so in swoops the next narcissist, right?
yeah.
Because you were very vulnerable.
Oh my gosh. Very, very vulnerable. And, it's amazing how like love bombing, I drank that like Kool-Aid. I was like water. I mean, the people that love bomb me in my life, and then I look back now, and when people compliment me or whatever, and I think that's a combo of both trauma brain damage and head injury brain damage, I don't care. I have a great partner now. Even when he says something blah, 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 beautiful, I'm like, whatever, that is so cheesy. I don't care. There's no emotion, and for being a person who's had over 30 something years of heightened emotion, it was affecting my health. I cried so much. I probably cried more tears than your average person. Why? What am I doing wrong? Blah, blah, blah. And you look at that, and then you get to where I'm at now. I look back at all that. I shake my head. I'm like, Ash, what were you doing? But in that time, this person was offering sanctuary. So I bought it.
Right. And I remember you telling me too that this person you're talking about now, he also had a very narcissistic family unit.
Yes.
And I remember you saying that was some of the first places where you started when you saw the family, his family unit, and it reminded you of some of the dynamics of your own family, those were some kind of moments where you were like, wait a minute, I
Oh,
don't
it's
agree with
instant.
everything that this is going on in his family, but that looked a lot like my own family. And then, connections started to be made for you, and you had been introduced to the topic of narcissism by this time, and things kind of started to reveal themselves to you. Is that
Yes.
right?
Very
Yeah.
slowly. I think actually I had a message to the sister. Uh, I mean, keep in mind, if you date a narcissist male that's a mesh to his mother and family, you're dating the entire family. That is what I was
Mm.
doing.
Mhm.
And I had told the sister once, I'd Googled it. This was probably early on in my partnership with this next guy. I was like, I think you're a mesh to your mom. I didn't, again, I didn't even know a meshment. And then, like, when you go down that dichotomy of enmeshment and narcissist, oh, it's I wouldn't want to wish that on anyone. That is that I mean, now I'll see it. I'll meet people who are enmeshed to their families, and I just
Mm.
kind of like roll my eyes and giggle and walk away like, "Whoo, I wouldn't." Like there's no boundaries, and
Right.
there is a
Right.
lot of control in those relationships. So,
Super
yeah, it
toxic.
did slowly reveal itself to me, which it still didn't help in the end. So,
Funny. So again, we're leading up to this next head injury, and um, we do need to take a commercial break. When we come back after this brief commercial break, yeah, let's talk about how all of this chaos, confusion, distracted state of mind led up to the second head injury. So please stay tuned for that. We'll hear more of Ash's story when we return. So we will be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back to Talks with Tracy. Ash and I are talking about her life experience. We were just talking about this time in her life where she was in a very toxic relationship with a narcissistic person. And this time she was dating the entire narcissistic family. So she was, go big or go home, right, Ash? And
definitely
this
go
was
big or go home.
this was a real time in your life, a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos, a lot of toxicity, and also moments where you were like, wait a minute, this isn't right. wait a minute, I
Yeah.
recognize this. The term narcissism had been introduced to you. You were starting to kind of look at things, and clouds were beginning to clear. And in the process of that, you began to set limits within this relationship, and break up from this relationship. And at the time of this second accident, you were kind of in the midst of that, right? You were no, I think you were no longer with him. Is that right? But you were still having some contact. It was a super confusing time, right?
So during the car accident that I got into that nearly took my life, it
Oh,
was our second breakup. So he discarded
okay.
me, which again, didn't know the nitty gritty details of narcissists. They are fun. If you do anything, holidays, they'll ruin it. So I was on a trip and he
Mm,
randomly messaged, I'm not going to be here when you get back. He left me. And I didn't understand why. And that was the first time, and I was upset. And then actually, over the course of the weekend, I was like, you know what? Let him go. Just, like just keep moving on with your life. And I had reached out to him and said, hey, there's this horse, blah, blah, blah. I respect your decision. Like, let's just, if you want this horse, let's be amicable. And it was, can we talk? Um,
mm,
but then the weird part happened after that, which was we didn't meet just to talk. We had to do this in front of people, and we had to do it in front of my friends. And this second person also took away my quote unquote friends in that little small group, but they weren't healthy anyway. Like, again, when you
mm-hmm,
realize that you've been just hobnobbing with narcissists, you're just kind of like the oddball out, and everyone around you that you choose to hang out with is a narcissist. That it's par for the course. So
mm,
we got back together, but it didn't feel right. We're all playing cards, and what changed, and when you call them out, right? When you call out a toxic person or a narcissist, the mask falls off. They don't like that, right? A
mm-hmm,
healthy person will take accountability of their actions. So I looked at everyone
mm-hmm,
and I was like, I don't trust you guys. I was like, and my partner was like, I don't even know why you did that to me, why I came home to that. I was shaking. I couldn't sleep. I lost sleep. So I was getting damage from that, anxiety,
mm,
didn't sleep at all. There was no reason, there was no fight, there was no cause for it. So by me doing that and stating to these people, it's going to take a lot of work. I don't trust any of you. It'll take a lot of
mm,
work. Well, the damage is done. They couldn't get me back, right? So when I took the
mm,
next trip, he discarded me the second time. It was It was always when I wasn't around. This time he had the place for a week. He had all my animals. So there was a control factor. He had control of what would go on that property, what happened with the dogs. Um,
mm,
I had nothing to do. I couldn't do anything. I was gone for a week. So the time of the accident was about a month afterwards. Uh,
mm.
I was, because you found your soulmate. when when you date a narcissist, you found your twin flame. I mean, you guys have everything in common. I mean, it's
Because
crazy.
they're mirroring you.
They're marrying you. I mean, there's a photo. I don't have it anymore of this young guy and I, but I'm sure I showed it to you. We look like twins. My hair. I normally have curly hair. We're both wearing the same colored flannels. It looked like a twin photo. Like, and so yeah, it's mirroring, right? But at the time I didn't really understand it, and I was telling
Mm-hmm,
my mom, because I'd gone on a date with this guy after, because that's what you do, you figure out, is there a rebound or something. And I was so worked up, I was headed to work, and I'm like, but I love this person. And that's when I had learned about trauma bond, which I had been seeing you.
mm-hmm,
um
mm-hmm,
it was it was such an eye-opener, because I didn't know. I was like, why would I be trauma bonded? I'm way too cool for this. Like, and I was, it's kind of like Stockholm syndrome, you're like, this
mm,
person's so destructive, but you love them, right? And in
mm-hmm,
that moment, after meeting a guy on a date, it was an awful experience. And I was like, but why can't I be with this other person who's my soulmate? Like, who cares about
mm-hmm,
our age difference? He's the one. The person in front of me, we're all in steady traffic. Her blinker lights were not working, brake lights weren't working. Hit the brakes. I tried to pop the clutch in my car and I hit her at 30 miles an hour. Airbag didn't deploy. So I was already at the time of the crash. I was so emotional, You know, like,
Mhm.
why can't I be with this person? And let me tell you, the rabbit
Mm.
hole of toxicity of this guy is like, I look back on that, I'm like, oh my gosh, why were
Mm.
you even with that person? But at the
Mm.
time, I was so traumatized from this situation. I went from one trauma right into the next.
Oh,
Lights out, crash.
right. Right. Now, this accident that you had, you hit your head in that accident, and now this is the front part of your brain, right? The left frontal
Yeah.
lobe.
Left frontal lobe,
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
Again,
30.
super important part of your brain. That it controls language. It controls emotions as you relate to the world and within the world. That's so important. There's it's actually the control panel for your personality. It's a very important part of your brain. And now this was even more significant damage, would you say, than even the first brain injury?
Yeah. So what it's called is compound brain injuries. The doctors came into
Mm,
the ER and said, you're probably going to have long-term symptoms. And of
mm,
course, I scoffed it off. And they said, you had too many brain injuries back to back. You had one in 2019 and you had
oh,
one now. And I did. I
yeah.
did have severe issues from vertigo, which I almost wrecked my new car because I had
Mm,
to pull over and I had to call 911 a month after. Was hospitalized for that. Migraines, speech issues. I can't write properly. Short-term memory
mm.
loss. Yeah, there's a lot. There's
Fatigue.
a lot of, yeah,
Hmm.
fatigue, um, aphasia, which is never fun. So they call it
Right.
neurofatigue, and then I have aphasia. So I don't,
Right. And aphasia is a loss of language.
yeah, loss of language, can't talk.
Hmm.
I'll stutter
Hmm.
if I'm overexhausted. So yes,
Hmm.
significant more damage, but it also came, and there was a blessing in it, and that's
Mm.
something that from, January onward, I started a blessing and a curse. As we've talked before, I would do some very dangerous things. We are very impulsive in a
Mm.
dangerous way, like I will save this person and get hit by cars or put
Right.
ourselves in
Well, and you
danger.
were already impulsive throughout your
Yeah.
lifetime anyway, as a result of the childhood trauma, and then brain injuries add to the impulsivity and whatnot, and just your ability to cognitively make distinctions in the world about what is going on. And I would agree that you've shared with me some more impulsive kind of moments that really put your safety at risk even.
Yes, yes. And now I kind of just talk to myself to not do that. It's that part's gotten better, but I would say
Right. Yeah.
the relating to the world, it's gone.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
there's, we've talked about it, like I have what they call flat affect.
Mhm.
I don't have emotion. I can smile, I can force emotion, I don't feel it. I don't feel the things that most people
Mm.
feel. From this accident, and as I was sort of taking notes, I'm like, is this part brain damage trauma from all this chaos? And then I hit
Mm.
a steering wheel, and then I get I actually damaged the brain in a sense that it was so weird to feel nothing. I would look
Mm.
for it. I would look for
I,
emotion.
how I've said before that I like quotes. You once said to me that feelings are different. This is a quote. Feelings are different. You're constantly looking for them and fighting for them.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
one moment, I'm going to ask our engineer, Dan, if we can just skip the commercial break and continue on till the end of the show, because I really want to stay with what we're talking about, because this flat affect is really an important piece to talk about. It really can severely impact your relationships when you no longer have, like, so you went to be an emotionally react from being emotionally reactive to not emotionally reactive or even responsive. So like kind of that, what the fuck to no fucks. Sorry for the language, but no
Literally.
fucks is kind of a good description of what you're talking about. And I also want to point out that this is an invisible injury,
Right.
right?
Right. I
And
look
that makes it,
normal,
you look
but
totally normal.
yeah, I look normal, but my response, my relationships, I have a great partner now. It took him a while to understand it. It's
Mm,
forced, right? Like the checking in, the I love yous, it's forced emotion because I do care,
mm,
but I don't
right.
care. Um,
Right. You don't
one
feel things the same way.
no. And the best example I had shared with you, and little warning to viewers or listeners, we had an incident with a dog. I had given my friends a puppy,
Mm,
and I didn't, I was slowly driving a diesel. Long story short, I ran over it. It was an 8-month-old puppy, and then I ran over it again. This dog was
mm,
clearly suffering, and there were other people there, very emotional and distressed, and I had no response. I just looked at this animal
mm,
suffering, didn't cry, didn't yell for help. My only response was, I have a 45 if someone needs it to put the dog down. I didn't have the emotional response that normal
mm.
people would have in a suffering situation. I just looked
And
at it.
you're an animal lover.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're an animal person. So
Yeah.
that is significant that you had such a flat affect, even in a moment um, that, concerned an animal. So
Yeah.
you can imagine how that kind of flat affect can uh, impact relationships. And again, in combination with it being invisible, we can explain and explain and explain to our partners what is going on in regard to our brains. But it's hard, wouldn't you say, for somebody who hasn't experienced it to truly understand. And it takes a fairly confident person to be like, okay, everything that she's doing isn't about me. This is
Right.
related to brain injury. That makes relationship really complex, wouldn't you say?
Very complex. I kind of I went from people pleasing in big circles and, partners and whatnot to a very
Mhm.
small group. And even in that group, I don't
Mm,
nurture my relationships as much. The other downfall is I literally live in the moment. It is no joke. I forget I have bills. I forget I have other animals. I forget I have a
mm,
partner. I forget that I'm a mom. So if I take, like,
mhm,
this year was a journey of seeing if I could, work horses again, ranch, pack. When I do something that's, somewhere else, and if something's not right in front of me, it's not in my sphere. So I
mm,
forget a lot of things that the rest of the world wouldn't forget, right? Their schedule, their appointments,
mhm,
their relationships, their friends. I'm kind of in my own little
mm.
world in that moment.
Right, right. Now, incredibly enough, despite all of that description that you just gave, you are also able to see kind of a blessing that has come with this.
Yeah.
So why don't you explain how, in the midst of all of this, and I love that you can find blessings in such adverse circumstances, right? That's inspirational. That's really looking at what your life, given this, can be and is now, and bringing about some light to it, right? Tell us about the pros.
I think the pros that I've really found, because at first it was very hard to look at that I don't have very much emotion anymore, where I used to be very emotional and very caring, very giving to other people, is it's a state of Zen. You just, you kind of find your peace with whatever happens. You accept things for what it is. I've learned that in
Mhm.
very chaotic situations, and I've been in a few with other people, I'm the calm person in the room. There's no
Mhm.
emotion. I'm not freaking out. I'm not yelling at people. I'm very calm. And so that part's really, I like that. I'm able
Mhm.
to be more fluid in appreciate that alone time, right? I'm not afraid to not be with the crowd or be around other people, but learning about, like, being present. And that part for me is that state of Zen is more important.
Mhm.
As we've discussed before, people that have flat effect don't like it. And it's very difficult for them if they lose emotion, because the emotion ties you to human beings. Well,
Mm,
now I feel like I'm
right.
watching a TV screen of humans, and I'm able to just sort of observe. There's no real emotion, you know what I mean? It's quite
Mhm.
peaceful. It's like the brain. My joke is I had a front left lobe lobotomy because I don't have the same things as I did before. So the blessing from hitting my front side was that I
Mhm.
don't have that constant chaos happening in there. You know what I mean? Looking for peace. Now my life is
Right.
peace. So
So I want to go to my phone for a moment, and you sent me, uh, well, thankfully, you still do have your ability to write and
right.
express, or express through written language. So I wanted to read one of your posts that you made in regard to this, what we're talking about today. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So this is something Ash wrote, posted. Um, she says, it's your reaction to adversity, not adversity itself, that determines how your life's story will develop. I have had the opportunity to dive deep into new places and experiences my entire life. Navigating my world now with a different brain has been transformative. As if parts of me are completely gone, others outburst randomly, and my sixth sense has become my safety. My reaction to others, fear, doesn't exist. What drives me is a primal force that I feel has come forward with this brain damage. And my language is fine tuned to nature in a way where I am truly happiest with not one soul around for hundreds of miles. We were just talking about that. The ability to completely disappear from conversations and physically be there is incredible. And somehow my quest for unknown has become amplified. That wild in you, right? I won't be able to relate to you, but I can show you how to let go by just staring at the stars, or finding 2 hours of sleep by a campfire on a saddle pad with your dog, a saddle Pendleton to keep you warm, or the ways to fish and learn what plants can save you and what ones can kill you. I can try to meet you in your chattering mind and show you letting go is the easiest path to take, once, of course, you do. I stopped fighting my reality this spring and accepted my new life, and while I hate dealing with people, I have learned perhaps you cannot see my disability, but I will make it the best reality. Forever, I have decided perhaps all of humanity needs a front lobe lobotomy. Perhaps then the anxiety and noise upstairs will stop. Beautiful. I love
Thank
your
you.
written expression. So now, if people would like to hear more of your, see more of your posts, how can they get a hold of you, or how can they find you on social media?
They can. I've been neglecting it a lot lately. I've been
Oh,
really just,
okay.
but I'm under Ashlyn Benavides on Facebook, AISLING, and then on Instagram. I don't have a lot of media accounts, and I haven't finished my book yet. It's Wild Spirit, but the first
Yeah.
I is number one. So
Oh, well, as soon as that is done, we are definitely going to be talking about that book, and I can't wait to read it. So, did you say Aisling Benavides is your social media?
yes, yeah,
Okay. Can you spell it, because the spelling is a little
funny, yeah,
tricky?
AISLING, and my last name is BENAVIDES.
Right.
So
So
yeah,
that first name is Aisling. All right. Well, thank you for being here today. And thank you for agreeing to come on next week. You know, we've gotten some listener questions that have been posed to
great.
the two of us. So that's what we're going to do next week. So I will see you right here next week, and hopefully everybody else here next week. So this has been Talks with Tracy on Bold Brave Television Network. Ash and I will see you next week. Thanks a lot.
This has been Talks with Tracy. Join us each week as Tracy and her guests will come together and realize that underneath it all, we are all the same and never alone. So join us each week and let Talks with Tracy be your safe place to land in your healing journey. Right here, Thursdays, 11 a.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.